You're stepping into evidence that refuses to stay explained. And once you see the pattern, it becomes harder to unsee. Number 10, the Longyou Caves. It started with a simple assumption that the pond had no bottom. For generations, villagers in eastern China believed it. Dark water, still surface, no depth anyone could measure. In 1992, a man named Wu Anai decided to test it. Not out of curiosity alone, but out of quiet defiance. He brought a pump, and he drained it. Slowly, the water level dropped. Hours passed, then days, and eventually, something appeared at the bottom. Not mud, not stone, an opening. A perfectly shaped, man-made entrance, cut into solid rock. What Wu had uncovered was not a pond. It was a doorway. When researchers entered the space below, they didn't find a tunnel. They found a cavern. Massive, then another, and another. Eventually, they realized the truth. There weren't one or two chambers. There were at least 24, each one carved deep into the earth, each one enormous, some spanning over 30,000 square feet, ceilings rising nearly 100 feet high, walls sloping with precise, consistent angles, and every single surface covered in the same pattern. Parallel lines, perfectly spaced, perfectly angled, running across walls, ceilings, and pillars, without deviation. That's when the first real question emerged. Who built this? Because this wasn't natural. It couldn't be. The geometry alone ruled that out. The symmetry, the scale, the consistency. Everything pointed to deliberate construction. And not small-scale construction either. To carve even one of these caverns would require removing thousands of tons of rock. All 24, over 1 million cubic meters. An engineering project on the scale of a civilization. So researchers turned to history. China has one of the most detailed historical records on Earth. Dynasties documented everything. Wars, roads, palaces, canals, even minor construction projects were recorded. Something this large should have been impossible to miss. But there was nothing. No records, no mentions, no names. It was as if an entire civilization built something monumental and then erased itself. Number 9, the Shigir Idol. Now imagine this. You are standing in a museum. In front of you is a wooden sculpture. Tall, thin, silent. Covered in carvings you don't understand. At first glance it looks primitive. Ancient but simple. Until you learn its age. More than 12,000 years old. Older than the pyramids. Older than cities. Older than writing itself. The Shigir Idol was discovered in 1890, buried deep in a peat bog in the Ural Mountains. The conditions had preserved it almost perfectly. Wood, that should have decayed thousands of years ago, remained intact. At first, it didn't seem extraordinary. Just another artifact, another piece of early human expression. But when scientists began analyzing it more carefully, the narrative shifted. The carvings weren't random. They weren't decorative. They were structured, intentional. Symbols arranged in patterns, faces embedded along its length, geometric sequences repeated with variation. This wasn't art. It was information, encoded. Some researchers believe it may represent a form of proto-writing. a system of communication that predates known language by thousands of years. A message from a time when we believed humans weren't capable of abstract symbolic systems. But here it was, standing in front of us, undeniable, untranslated. And that's the most unsettling part. We can see it, we can measure it, we can date it, but we cannot understand it. Because whatever culture created it left nothing else behind. No dictionary, no continuation, no descendants we can trace. It is a voice, speaking across 12,000 years, in a language that no longer exists. And slowly, even that voice is fading. The wood is deteriorating. Time is catching up. And with it, whatever meaning it carried. Number 8, Derinkuyu Underground City. If you were forced to disappear completely, how far would you go? Underground. A few meters. Maybe deep enough to hide from danger. Now imagine going deeper. Not just deeper, but building an entire world beneath the surface. In 1963, a man in central Turkey knocked down a wall in his basement. Behind it was empty space. He stepped through and found a passage, then a room, then another. What he had uncovered was not a hidden chamber. It was a city, Derinkuyu, a vast underground network descending nearly 300 feet below ground, carved directly into stone, layer after layer, level after level. At full capacity, it could house 20,000 people, with animals, food supplies, water systems, ventilation shafts, everything needed to survive. Not for days, but for months, possibly years. This wasn't a shelter. It was a refuge from something sustained. The deeper you go, the more deliberate it feels. Narrow corridors force movement in single file. Massive stone doors conceal entire sections. Hidden choke points, ambush positions, everything designed for defense. But defense against what? History tells us the city was used by multiple civilizations. Phrygians, Christians, Byzantines, each one expanding it, living in it, hiding in it, but none of them built the original structure. The oldest sections are far older, carved when the stone was softer, a technique requiring knowledge, lost to time. And then there's the scale. Derinkuyu is not alone. The entire region is filled with underground complexes, hundreds of them, connected, expanding beneath the surface like a hidden network, which leads to a question history cannot answer. Why would thousands of people choose to live underground for extended periods of time? Not temporarily, not occasionally, but in a way that required full infrastructure, full adaptation, full commitment, because whatever they were hiding from, it wasn't brief, it wasn't local, and it wasn't survivable above ground. Number 7, the Oklo Natural Nuclear Reactor. In 1972, something incredibly small went wrong. So small, most people would have missed it entirely. A fraction of a percent. That's all it was. At a uranium processing facility in France, scientists were analyzing ore shipped from a mine in Oklo, located in Gabon. The process was routine, predictable. Uranium, no matter where it comes from on Earth, always contains a specific ratio of isotopes. It's one of the most stable constants in nuclear science. But this sample was different. Not by much, but enough. The concentration of uranium-235, the isotope required for nuclear fission, was slightly lower than it should have been. Not missing, just reduced. At first, it didn't make sense. There are only a few ways to reduce uranium-235, and all of them involve nuclear reactions, which led to an impossible question. Had this uranium already been used before it was mined? Further investigation began. Samples were retested. Geological surveys expanded. And slowly, the truth started to emerge. Deep underground, in a region untouched for billions of years, there were zones where nuclear reactions had already happened. Naturally, not in a laboratory, not in a reactor, in the Earth itself, around 1.7 billion years ago. The conditions inside the Oklo deposit aligned perfectly. Water seeped into uranium-rich rock, acting as a neutron moderator. The concentration of uranium-235 was higher back then than it is today, just enough to sustain a chain reaction. And so, the Earth built its own reactor. It didn't explode. It didn't spiral out of control. It operated stably, intermittently, for over 300,000 years. Think about that. A natural nuclear reactor, running longer than human civilization has existed. But here's the detail that unsettled scientists the most. The waste. Modern nuclear reactors produce radioactive byproducts that remain dangerous for thousands of years. We still don't have a perfect solution for storing them safely. But Oklo did. The byproducts of those ancient reactions remained contained, locked in place, for nearly 2 billion years. No leakage, no catastrophic spread, just quiet containment, which raises a different kind of question. Not about the past, but about the present. If nature solved a problem we still struggle with today, what else has it already done that we haven't recognized yet? Number 6, Göbekli Tepe. There is a moment in history that shouldn't exist. A moment where everything we thought we understood about civilization falls apart. That moment sits on a hill in Göbekli Tepe. When archaeologists first saw it, they almost ignored it. Just another mound, another hill among thousands, until one man looked closer and realized this wasn't natural. Beneath the surface, hidden under layers of earth, were structures, massive ones, circular enclosures, stone pillars, carved, placed with intention. Some of them stood over 18 feet tall, weighing up to 16 tons. And they weren't rough. They were detailed, decorated with animals, symbols, figures. It was architecture, complex, organized, planned. Then came the date, and everything changed. Around 9600 BCE, over 11,000 years ago. That's before cities, before pottery, before metal, before writing, and most importantly, before agriculture. According to everything we thought we knew, human civilization followed a clear sequence. First came farming, then surplus food, then settlements, then religion, then monuments. Göbekli Tepe reversed it. The monument came first, which means hunter-gatherers, People without farms, without cities, organized themselves to build something enormous, not for survival, but for meaning. And then, after centuries of use, they did something even stranger. They buried it, deliberately, carefully, completely, stone by stone, layer by layer. They hid it, not abandoned, not destroyed, hidden, as if whatever it represented wasn't meant to remain visible. Number 5, the Nampa Figurine. Some discoveries are loud. They force attention. They demand explanation. Others are quiet, small, easy to ignore, until you realize where they came from. In 1889, a drilling crew in Nampa was working deep underground, hundreds of feet below the surface, pulling up core samples from ancient geological layers. Then something appeared. Inside the sample, a small object, barely an inch tall, made of clay. It looked like a figure. Human. Arms, legs, form. At first, it seemed like contamination. Something that fell in. Something recent. But the deeper they looked, the less that explanation held. The layer it came from had been sealed for nearly 2 million years. Long before modern humans. Long before tools like this existed. And yet, there it was. The clay matched the surrounding material. The staining matched long-term burial. The structure showed deliberate shaping. It wasn't natural, and it wasn't supposed to be there. So explanations formed. Maybe it fell in during drilling. Maybe the layer was misstated. Maybe it was a hoax. But none of those answers fully worked, because the drilling method made contamination unlikely. The geology was confirmed, and the artifact itself showed no signs of recent intrusion, which leaves a possibility that most are uncomfortable even considering, that something capable of shaping human-like figures existed far earlier than we believe. Or something else made it. Number 4, the Bosnian Pyramid Complex. Sometimes, the mystery isn't just the object, it's the reaction to it. In 2005, a researcher visited a hill in Visoko. At first glance, it looked ordinary, but the shape felt too precise, too structured. 4 sides, aligned with cardinal directions, sloping faces. He proposed something controversial. That the hill wasn't a hill, it was a pyramid. The claim spread quickly, and just as quickly, it was rejected. Geologists called it natural. Archaeologists dismissed it. Statements were issued. Debate shut down. Case closed. But not entirely. Because beneath the hill, there were tunnels. Real ones. Excavated. Mapped. The Ravni tunnels. Stone blocks. Tool marks. Symbols carved into surfaces. Some dating estimates placed them thousands of years old, far older than expected for the region. And yet, they remained largely unstudied, not because they weren't real, but because of what they were associated with, which leaves a strange situation. A site where something clearly exists, but isn't fully investigated, not disproven, not confirmed, just left in uncertainty. Number 3, the Bagong Pipes. In a remote region of Qinghai, near a mountain few people visit, There are structures embedded in rock. They look like pipes, metallic, cylindrical, running through stone. Some are large, others almost microscopic. At first glance, they seem artificial, placed, constructed, but the rock surrounding them is ancient, dated to around 150 million years old. That's before humans, before mammals dominated Earth, during the age of dinosaurs, which creates an obvious contradiction. If they're man-made, they shouldn't exist. If they're natural, they shouldn't look like this. Tests revealed something else. Most of the material matched known compounds, iron oxides, minerals, but a portion, around 8%, didn't match anything identified. Unknown composition, unresolved. Some scientists proposed a natural explanation. Fossilized roots, mineral replacement over time. And in some cases, that theory works, but not for everything, because certain pipes run straight, uniform, unbranching, something roots rarely do. So the site remains partially explained, partially dismissed, and quietly unresolved. Number 2, the Ica stones. Some discoveries feel impossible. Others feel wrong. Not because they break the rules, but because they rewrite them entirely. In the deserts of southern Peru, near a quiet town called Ica, thousands of stones began to surface. At first, they seemed unremarkable. Dark, smooth, ordinary river stones, until someone looked closer and saw the engravings. Not random scratches, not symbols, scenes, detailed scenes, humans doing things they shouldn't be able to do, performing surgery, using tools, observing the sky through instruments. And then, something that made the entire collection impossible to ignore. Dinosaurs, not bones, not fossils, living creatures, standing beside humans, interacting with them. Creatures that, according to everything we know, went extinct 65 million years before humans existed. And yet, on these stones, they coexist. A physician named Javier Cabrera Darquia became obsessed. He began collecting them, one by one, then dozens, then hundreds, eventually thousands. By the end of his life, his collection had grown to over 15,000 stones, and the patterns became undeniable. These weren't isolated images. They formed a narrative, a system, a record. Some stones showed detailed anatomical procedures, operations that resemble organ transplants, surgical precision that would require advanced knowledge. Others depicted celestial observations, star patterns, instruments resembling telescopes. And the dinosaurs weren't random guesses. Some carvings showed features that science itself didn't fully understand until decades later. Skin textures, postures, details that weren't widely known when the stones first appeared. Which leads to the obvious explanation. A hoax, and officially, that's exactly what it became. A local farmer, Basilio Achuya, claimed responsibility. Said he carved them himself, sold them for profit. Case closed. But not quite. Because later, he took it back. He said the confession wasn't real. He only admitted to it to avoid legal trouble. And when researchers looked closer, new problems appeared. The sheer number of stones, tens of thousands. To produce them alone would require carving multiple stones every single day. For decades, no workshop was found, no tools, no production site, nothing that could explain that scale. And then there's the surface. The stones are made of andesite, covered in a natural oxidation layer that takes centuries to form. On many of them, the engraving show the same level of weathering as the outer surface. Meaning, if they were carved, they weren't carved recently. And yet, they cannot exist. So they sit in a strange place. Not accepted, not fully studied, displayed, photographed, then quietly ignored. Because answering what they are would require asking questions no one is ready to answer. Number 1, the Dropa stones. Some mysteries fade with time. They lose detail. They dissolve into rumor. This one did the opposite. The more people tried to verify it, the less stable it became. The story begins in 1938, in a remote mountain range between China and Tibet. An expedition, a series of caves, and something inside them. Skeletons, small, fragile, with unusually large skulls. And beside them, hundreds of stone discs, each one nearly identical, circular, with a hole in the center. But the surface was different. A spiral groove ran from the edge to the center. And inside that groove, tiny markings, microscopic, precise, not decoration, writing, or at least something like it. According to later accounts, a researcher named Sum Nui spent years studying them, trying to decode the patterns, and eventually, he claimed he had. What he described changed the story completely. The inscriptions told of a group, a people called the Dropa, beings who had arrived from somewhere else, stranded, unable to leave, living in the mountains, dying there. If true, it wouldn't just rewrite history. It would erase the boundary between archaeology and something else entirely. But here, where everything begins to collapse, the researcher cannot be verified. The institution he worked for doesn't exist in any official record. The original papers are missing. The photographs don't match. Some images show known artifacts. Others show objects that disappeared. At one point, an engineer claimed to have seen the discs in a museum, photographed them. When he returned, they were gone. No records, no catalog entries, no acknowledgement they were ever there. And that's the real mystery. Not whether the story is true, but how completely the evidence dissolves. Every path leads to something that almost exists. Names that almost match. Places that almost confirm. It's as if the story itself is unstable. Either it was one of the most elaborate hoaxes ever constructed, built with precision, maintained across decades, then quietly abandoned, or something real was systematically erased. And now, all that remains is the outline. Individually, each of these discoveries can be dismissed. A hoax, a misinterpretation, an anomaly. But together, they form something else. A pattern, structures built before they should exist. Artifacts found where they don't belong. Technologies appearing too early. Knowledge emerging without origin. And most importantly, a consistent response. Not investigation. Not resolution. Avoidance. Dismissal without depth. Conclusions without full analysis.